The morning Lena Avery arrived at Hawthorne Ranch, the world felt too big and too hard for someone as worn down as she was. The dust of the long road clung to her skirt hem, and her boots were scuffed from miles of walking. Her mother's medicine pouch was tucked safely in her bag, a constant reminder of why she had pushed herself to come this far. She needed money, steady money, and this ranch was the only place that had offered her even the smallest chance. Hawthorne Ranch rose ahead of her like a kingdom built on sweat and sunlight. The land stretched wide, golden and endless, dotted with cattle and framed by rolling hills. Strong fences bordered pastures where workers moved with purposeful rhythm. Lena felt small in comparison, just a thin girl with tired eyes stepping into a world ruled by power, grit, and the men who shaped it. She took a deep breath as she approached the main house. Her fingers couldn't stop trembling. All she knew was the ad from town: help needed, kitchen hand, immediate work. They didn't ask for references. They didn't ask for experience. That alone felt like a miracle. Inside, the ranch's cook, Mrs. Hargreaves, greeted her with raised brows and a firm nod. The older woman's face was lined from years of heat and work, but her eyes, sharp and kind, studied Lena carefully. "You can peel potatoes?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Wash dishes?" "Yes." "Keep quiet when needed?" Lena nodded. She was good at that, too good. Maybe growing up with hardship had taught her silence could be safety. Mrs. Hargreaves handed her an apron and pointed toward a long wooden counter. "Then welcome to the kitchen. Let's see what your hands can do." Just like that, Lena had a place, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a sliver of hope. But she wasn't the only one paying attention. From the doorway connecting the kitchen to the main hall, Cole Hawthorne paused on his way out to the stables. Tall, broad-shouldered, and wrapped in the quiet confidence only a ranch owner could possess, he watched the new girl with a stillness that didn't match the rough world around him. Lena didn't notice him at first. Her focus stayed on scrubbing a mountain of pots. She didn't know her presence had caught a man's attention, a man who never let his eyes linger on any worker longer than necessary. Yet something about her tugged at him. Cole wasn't a man easily shaken. Years of responsibility had chiseled him into someone steady, unyielding, and often unreadable. He kept his emotions tucked away beneath layers of duty. But when he saw Lena brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear with hands still wet from the wash basin, something inside him stuttered for the briefest moment. A ripple he didn't welcome. Mrs. Hargreaves noticed his lingering and smirked quietly to herself. Lena finally glanced up, and for a split second, just when her eyes met Cole's, she startled slightly, not expecting anyone to be watching her. He nodded politely, expression unreadable, then stepped away and continued on to the porch. But Lena felt something shift in that small moment, though she couldn't name it. She spent the rest of the morning learning the rhythm of the ranch kitchen, peeling basket after basket of potatoes, washing pans so heavy they nearly slipped from her hands, stirring a pot of stew that smelled rich and comforting. The work was hard, but it felt purposeful, different from the desperate scrubbing she did at home. Inside her chest, a quiet gratitude bloomed. Maybe this place could be her chance. Maybe she could save her mother. Maybe she could stand on her own feet again. Yet, every now and then she felt the ghost of a gaze on her. It was never harsh, never demanding, just present, warm, and unsettling in a way she didn't understand. And Cole, though he kept his distance, found his thoughts drifting to the kitchen more than he cared to admit. He told himself it was because they had hired someone new, because he needed to ensure everything ran smoothly on his ranch. But deep down, he knew better. Something about the girl stirred a quiet yearning he hadn't felt in years, if ever. Neither of them knew then how much that tiny spark would grow. Cole Hawthorne had always been the kind of man who rose before the sun and worked. Long after it dipped beneath the horizon, work was his shield, his rhythm, and often his excuse to avoid anything resembling personal entanglement. Running a ranch wasn't just a job, it was a life that demanded discipline, clarity, and distance. Cole did not allow himself distractions, but Lena Avery was becoming one. It started quietly, a glimpse of her through the kitchen window as he walked to the stables, the soft sound of her humming while she kneaded the morning dough, the gentle way she moved, careful, respectful, always trying to avoid taking up space. There was something about that humility, that softness, that made Cole's chest tighten in ways he hadn't expected at first. He dismissed it. She was new. He was responsible for everyone who worked under his roof. It was normal, he told himself, to check in more than usual, to make sure she wasn't struggling, but the truth he didn't admit was simpler. He liked seeing her. One afternoon, he found himself pausing outside the kitchen again. Lena stood by the counter, sleeves rolled up, arms dusted lightly with flour. Her concentration was absolute, as if each loaf she shaped carried the weight of her future. Mrs. Hargreaves barked instructions, and Lena responded with quiet yes ma'ams, her focus never breaking. Cole watched longer than he meant to. He wasn't used to such feelings. Years of leading a ranch had demanded he tame his own emotions more fiercely than any wild horse. But Lena slipped past those defenses as easily as if they'd never existed. When she finally looked up and caught his gaze, she startled again. She always did, and every time, that hint of nervousness tugged something deep in him, protective, gentle, surprising. He cleared his throat and stepped inside. "Everything going well?" he asked, directing his voice toward Mrs. Hargreaves but letting his eyes flick back to Lena for half a second too long. "She's learning fast," the older woman replied. "Quiet girl, good hands." Lena lowered her gaze, cheeks warming. Cole felt an odd sense of pride at the compliment, though he couldn't explain why. "Good," he said. "If you need anything, let me know." It wasn't something he normally told kitchen workers, but the words came out before he could stop them. Later that evening, long after supper was served and the ranch hands had left the dining hall, Lena remained alone in the kitchen, washing dishes under the soft glow of lantern light. The air smelled of roasted meat, herbs, and warm bread, the aromas of a place that felt almost like home, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Cole walked in again, boots echoing softly on the wooden floor. Lena almost dropped the plate in her hands. I'm almost done, sir," she whispered, unsure if she had done something wrong. Cole shook his head, removing his hat. "No rush." He hesitated, then added, "You don't have to call me sir. Cole is fine." She blinked in surprise. "But you're the owner, and you're part of this ranch now," he said softly. "We treat people like family here." The word family stung her heart in a way he could never know. Cole saw something flicker in her expression, gratitude mixed with pain, and, though he didn't pry, it settled into him like a stone. He wanted to understand her. He wanted to know why someone so young carried sorrow in her eyes. He wanted more than he cared to admit to take that weight from her shoulders, but he held himself back. Because his desire, growing as quietly as a tide rising in the night, felt dangerous. She was innocent in ways he no longer was. She had come here to survive, not to get tangled in the silent longings of a man twice her size and burdened by responsibility, so he kept his voice steady, his distance measured. Yet every night, when the ranch quieted and he sat alone in his office reviewing the day's work, he found his mind drifting to the girl in the kitchen with flour on her cheeks and hope in her heart. A craving he had never invited, one he feared he could not contain, had begun to shape the air between them, and Lena felt it too, though neither dared speak it. Not yet. The storm rolled in without warning. All afternoon, the wind had been teasing the edges of the ranch, tugging at loose shingles, rattling fence posts, stirring up dust clouds across the fields. By evening, the sky turned a deep, bruised purple. The cattle grew restless, the horses uneasy, and even the seasoned ranch hands kept glancing upward with quiet worry. Lena noticed it too, as she swept the kitchen floor after supper. The lanterns flickered, shadows stretching long across the wooden walls. The first crack of thunder made her jump, the broom slipping from her grasp. She wasn't afraid of storms normally, but something about the raw, untamed fury of this one felt different, bigger, closer, threatening. Rain came down in sheets soon. After, slamming against the windows like handfuls of gravel, Mrs. Hargreaves retired early, muttering about her old bones aching in bad weather, leaving Lena alone to finish the night's chores. The ranch house suddenly felt enormous, every creak amplified by the wind's howl. She tried to distract herself by kneading bread dough for the morning, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Then came another thunderclap, louder this time, shaking the pots on their hooks. Lena gasped and backed up until she found herself leaning against the warm iron stove. The storm dredged up memories she kept buried. Nights when she hid behind a thin curtain while her parents argued. Nights when lightning illuminated the cracks in their leaking roof. Fear had lived inside her for so long that it sprang up easily, like a shadow returning to claim its place. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to breathe through the rising panic. That was how Cole found her. He had finished checking the stables, making sure the horses were calm and the stalls secured, when he noticed the kitchen light still glowing through the rain-streaked windows. He hadn't expected anyone to be awake. His workers usually hurried to their bunks during storms, but something made him pause. Something tugged at him gently but insistently. He stepped into the kitchen, rain dripping from his coat, boots heavy on the floorboards. "Lena," he called softly. She startled so hard she nearly dropped the dough bowl. "Cole, I didn't expect anyone." "You okay?" he asked, voice low and steady, wiping water from his brow. "Storm's rough. Didn't mean to scare you." Lena opened her mouth to answer, but the thunder cracked again, shaking her resolve. Her breath hitched. Cole's expression shifted, not to pity, but to concern so deep and instinctive it warmed her through the fear. He took a careful step forward, not touching her, not crowding her, just anchoring himself nearby like a solid oak in a field of wind. "You don't have to be alone right now," he said gently. The words struck her harder than the thunder. No one had ever said that to her. "I'm fine," she murmured weakly, eyes down. Storms make me uneasy." Cole nodded. "Happens to plenty of folks." "Doesn't make you weak," she swallowed, surprised by how much she needed to hear that. A lantern flickered, dimming as the wind howled outside the shutters. Lena shivered despite the heat of the stove. Without thinking, Cole moved closer, not touching but offering his warmth, his presence. Her eyes lifted, meeting his dot, and for the first time, neither looked away. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face in stark silver blue light. His jaw was tense, not from anger but from restraint. His eyes were steady, searching hers, making the space between them feel impossibly small. "Do storms bother you?" she whispered. "No," he replied, But seeing you shaken does. The truth hung in the air between them, quiet, heavy, undeniable. Lena felt warmth rise in her chest, mingling with the fear, softening it. Cole's nearness made her feel safe, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Another thunderclap rattled the windows, and instinctively she stepped closer to him. Just an inch. Just enough for her shoulder to brush his arm. Cole froze, breath catching for only a fraction of a second. It was the smallest touch, accidental, trembling, but it struck him with the force of a revelation. He wanted her. He cared for her, and he couldn't admit either. He looked away first, jaw tightening as he exhaled slowly. "Storm will pass," he murmured. "I'll stay until you feel steady." Lena nodded, cheeks warm, heart racing. They stood together in the small kitchen, surrounded by flickering lanterns and roaring wind, sharing no words, only the electric silence of two people feeling something they weren't ready to name. And though nothing happened, everything changed. Something between them had shifted deeply, quietly, like a seed cracking open beneath the soil. When the storm finally eased, dawn was still far away, but Lena no longer felt alone, and cold. He knew the boundary he'd been clinging to had just grown dangerously thin. The storm passed, but the ranch didn't slip back into peace the next morning. Something in the air felt off, an uneasiness that tugged at Cole Hawthorne from the moment he stepped outside to check the fields. The sky was clear, the sun sharp and golden over the hills, but the quiet was wrong, too still, too watchful. When he reached the north pasture, he saw the sign immediately. Tracks fresh, heavy, too many to belong to his own men. Cattle thieves. They'd been hitting ranches around the region for months, taking livestock supplies, anything they could load onto stolen wagons in the dead of night. Cole had been preparing himself for the possibility, reinforcing fences and assigning night patrols. But seeing the deep boot marks near his own property ignited something fierce inside him. He wasn't afraid for the cattle. He was afraid for the people under his care. And though he never said it out loud, especially for Lena, that fear followed him the entire day. Lena noticed the change in him before anyone else. She saw it in the way he walked stiffer, more alert, in the way he paused at windows, scanning the open fields as if expecting something to move. Even in the kitchen, where she spent most of her hours, she could feel his presence near the doorway more often than usual. "Everything all right?" she finally asked one afternoon, carefully slicing vegetables for stew. Cole didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "There were tracks by the north fence, too many." Lena froze, knife paused midair. "That means someone was here." "Maybe," he said. "Maybe they were just passing through. But I don't like taking chances." Mrs. Hargreaves overheard part of it and clucked her tongue. "Those bandits again. Nothing but trouble." Cole nodded grimly. "Which is why I want everyone inside before dusk, and no one walking around alone. Especially not you, Lena." He didn't mean for the last part to come out so direct, so protective, but it did. Lena's breath caught me. Cole exhaled and adjusted his hat, trying to look more casual than he felt. Anyone could be at risk. "I'm not singling you out." But he was, and they both knew it. Nights grew heavier after that. Lanterns burned later. Doors were checked twice, sometimes 3 times. The ranch hands sharpened tools and kept rifles closer. The kitchen, usually a warm refuge filled with laughter and clinking dishes, felt shadowed by an invisible threat. Lena tried not to show her fear, but whenever the wind rattled a shutter or a dog barked in the distance, she flinched. She had grown up learning how danger could creep into quiet places, how trouble had a way of finding the vulnerable. Cole saw every flinch, and each one tightened something inside him. One evening, just before sundown, she finished serving dinner and began walking across the courtyard to her small quarters. The path was empty, the sky dimming quickly. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Her breath stopped, but before fear could take hold, Cole's voice reached her softly through the dusk. "Hold up," she turned, exhaling in relief. "Cole, you scared me." His jaw tightened. He hated that. "You shouldn't be walking alone." "I'm just going to my room, I know," he said, stepping beside her. "That's why I'm walking you there." It was such a simple sentence, but it filled her chest with warmth she wasn't prepared for. A man like Cole didn't offer unnecessary comfort. He didn't coddle, he protected. And right now he was protecting her. They walked together in the growing dark. Her steps were small, his were steady. Their shoulders brushed once, sending a quiet shiver through both. Neither mentioned it. When they reached her door, he paused. "If anything feels off," he said quietly, "anything at all, you come find me. Understand?" Lena nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I will." He hesitated for a second, long enough for her to see the worry flickering behind his normally controlled gaze. Then he stepped back, tipping his hat. "Good night, Lena." "Good night, Cole." But the danger didn't move on. It crept closer. Tracks appeared again the next morning, a missing fence rail, a distant whistle in the dark that didn't belong to any of his men. Cole's protective instincts sharpened into steel, and Lena, though she tried to stay brave, felt the tension coil tighter around her heart. Something was coming, and they both knew it, but neither realized just how much the danger would change the course of their quiet, growing bond. The danger on the ranch seemed to thicken the air itself. Every night, the workers double-checked gates, lanterns burned later, and the wind carried the uneasy creak of fences. But later that week, when the rest of the ranch had gone quiet, Lena found herself alone again in the kitchen, this time long past midnight. She hadn't meant to stay so late. After dinner, she'd discovered that the bread dough for the next morning hadn't risen properly. Likely due to the cold draft from the storm-damaged window, instead of serving the ranch half-finished loaves, she had sighed, rolled up her sleeves, and started over. And baking, like many things on the ranch, took time. The kitchen was warm despite the darkness outside. The glowing lantern cast a soft golden halo on the wooden counters, illuminating her flour-covered hands as she shaped the dough with gentle precision. She hummed under her breath, a small habit she'd never broken, to keep herself calm in the late-night silence. But the silence didn't stay silent for long. A faint click sounded from the front of the house. Lena froze, heart pounding. Footsteps, slow, steady, unmistakably heavy, moved across the porch. Fear prickled the back of her neck. She looked toward the knife block, unsure if she should grab one. The ranch hands didn't usually walk around this late. What if it wasn't one of them? She held her breath as the steps grew closer. Then the kitchen door slowly pushed open. Lena nearly gasped before a familiar voice cut through the dark. Lena. Her knees almost gave out with relief. "Collio scared me." Cole stepped inside, hat dripping rainwater, his coat heavy from riding the perimeter. "I didn't expect anyone still awake," he said, brushing water from his shoulders. Then he paused. His eyes softened as they landed on her. "You're baking at this hour?" Lena nodded shyly. "The dough didn't rise. I didn't want tomorrow's breakfast to be ruined." Cole exhaled slowly, a mixture of admiration and quiet frustration. "You work too hard." "You do too," she replied, surprising even herself. He stopped. The rain pattered softly against the windows. Something unspoken moved between them, slow and warm, gathering strength like the storm that had passed days earlier. Cole stepped closer, not looming, but drawn. He took in the flour on her cheek, the loose tendrils of hair escaping her braid, the gentle focus in her eyes that always made his breath catch. "You shouldn't be alone this late," he said quietly. "Not with everything going on." Lena pressed her hands together, not quite meeting his gaze. "I didn't want to bother anyone." "You wouldn't," Cole said. His voice was low, steady, softer than she had ever heard it. "Least of all me." The confession slipped out before he could contain it, and Lena felt those words settle into her chest like a spark igniting something she had tried to ignore for weeks. Cole took one more step toward her. He wasn't touching her, but the warmth of his presence filled the entire kitchen. The scent of rain on his coat mingled with the sweetness of baking bread, creating something strangely comforting. "Lena," he murmured, eyes searching hers. "There's something I need to say." Her heart thundered. "What is it?" He swallowed. This was a man accustomed to control, to silence, to burying things that felt too dangerous. But not tonight. Not with her standing there in the soft lantern light. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you," he admitted, "even when I try." Lena's breath caught. She felt the world tilt, quiet and bright and terrifying. "Cole, you're kind. You work harder than anyone here. You walk around like you're invisible. And he stopped, jaw working. "I see you more than I should, more than I meant to." His voice trembled with truth he could no longer hide. Lena's eyes warmed, not with fear, but with something deep and fragile. I thought it was just me," she whispered. Cole's head lifted sharply. It wasn't. Silence wrapped around them, thick and pulsing. The lantern flickered, casting shadows that danced across the walls, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Lena stepped closer, just one step. "Cole," she said gently, "I feel it too. I've tried to ignore it, but—" Her voice failed her. She pressed a flour-dusted hand against her chest. "You make me feel something I don't have a name for." His eyes softened with emotion and something like relief. He didn't touch her. He didn't dare. But the distance between them shrank until their breaths mingled. The storm outside was gone, but a different kind of storm, quiet, warm, undeniable, filled the kitchen. Neither moved. Neither spoke, but everything between them shifted. For the first time, their unspoken longing finally broke the surface. Gentle yet unstoppable. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a touch. It was a confession, one that changed everything. The night Cole confessed his feelings did not end with declarations or embraces. It ended with something far more subtle and far more powerful. A promise in the way they looked at each other. A quiet vow. Neither dared to speak aloud yet, but the world outside the kitchen wasn't finished testing them. 2 nights later, danger finally arrived. It was near midnight when the ranch dogs erupted in frantic barking. Lena jolted awake in her small room, heart pounding. She pressed her palms to her ears as the barking grew louder, sharper, angrier. A second later, the unmistakable snap of breaking wood echoed across the yard. Someone was at the livestock pens, and they weren't alone. Lena scrambled to her window and saw dark figures moving by torchlight 3. Maybe for their silhouettes hunched, purposeful. They were cutting the fences. Her breath seized before she could fully process the fear rising inside her. A loud knock shook her door. "Lena, it's me." Open up, Cole's voice. She flung the latch and pulled the door wide. Cole stood there in the dim lantern glow, rifle slung over his shoulder, jaw tight with controlled fury. His eyes swept over her, not in desire this time, but in raw, urgent worry. "You stay behind me," he said, voice low but steady. "Understand?" Lena nodded, trembling. She had never been so grateful to see anyone. The ranch erupted in motion as Cole led her through the house. Ranch hands rushed past the windows, some heading toward the stables, others toward the fence lines. The dogs barked relentlessly at the intruders who were trying to drive off cattle. Cole stepped onto the porch with Lena right behind him. The air crackled with danger. Lanterns danced across the yard like frantic fireflies. "You should go inside," he said firmly. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." But Lena shook her head. "What if you need help?" He turned to her fully then, rain-soaked hair clinging to his forehead, breath misting in the cold night. His expression softened just for her. "Lena," he said gently, "the only thing I need you to do is stay safe." Her eyes burned with him. Yes, but also something deeper, trust. Cole reached out as if to touch her cheek, then hesitated, hand hovering in the air between them. Not quite a touch, not quite letting go. His restraint only made the moment more intimate than a shout cut through the night. "They're running, two over the ridge." Cole's hand pulled back instantly. Duty surged back into him like a tide. "I have to go," he said. "Stay where you're safe, please." And then he was going running across the yard, boots slamming into the dirt, commanding his men with the sharp precision of someone who would fight to the last breath for the people he loved. Lena stood on the porch, gripping the wooden railing until her knuckles ached. She watched the dark flashes of movement beyond the fences, the lantern light swinging wildly. Fear clawed at her, but she refused to go inside. She couldn't, not until she knew Cole was safe. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Then, finally, the shouting faded. The dogs quieted. The cattle calmed. Cole emerged from the darkness, breathing hard but steady, rifle still in hand. Dirt smeared his cheek. His shirt was ripped at the shoulder, but he was whole. Lena ran to him before she could stop herself. "Cole." He caught her instinctively, arms steadying her as she collided into him, not in passion, but in relief so overwhelming it stole both their breath. She clung to his coat, trembling, and he held her tighter than he meant to. "It's over," he murmured against her hair. "You're safe. You're safe," she whispered back, voice cracking. He pulled back just enough to see her face. Her eyes were shining with tears, not of fear anymore, but of something deeper, something raw and honest, I thought. She swallowed hard. "I thought I might lose you." Cole's jaw clenched, not from anger but from the weight of how much her words meant to him. He lifted a hand, slow, hesitant hand, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "Lena," he said softly, "you're the last person I want to leave behind in this world." She froze. The truth in his voice was undeniable. The storm of danger around them had settled, but a different kind of storm, warm, tender, unrestrained, rose between them. Cole took her hand, slowly, deliberately. "We'll figure this out," he murmured. "Whatever this is, whatever we're becoming." Lena squeezed his hand back. "I don't want to run from it anymore." And there, under the fading lantern light, with the ranch quiet and safe again, they finally allowed themselves to stand together. Not rancher and kitchen girl, not protector and protected, not the people fighting their feelings, but something far more real. Two souls choosing each other despite danger, despite fear, despite the walls they both carried. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a vow. It was a beginning, the kind that could change everything.